Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, flying solo. It has been a minute since my last episode, maybe like 2-3 months or something like that. I just needed to tune out during the playoffs after the Warriors got eliminated after that really disappointing season. But, you know, this version of this podcast, this primarily solo version, started the day Klay tore his Achilles, which was the same day they drafted James Wiseman back in 2020, the pandemic year. So I thought it would be fitting. I mean, I had to come back for Klay's final official. I mean, he was a free agent, but his departure from the Warriors after a storied, 12-13 year career here. And let me just say, and I've said this before on previous episodes, that I love Klay Thompson. He's the best two guard the Warriors have ever had. He's a legend. He'll do all that statue stuff. 5-time All-Star, some of the most unique quotes, some of the most unique memories, some of the most unique shooting nights we will ever see from anyone. And it's tough because in 2019, man, that Game 6 injury, I will always hate Danny Green. I will have an irrational hate for Danny Green for fouling Klay so that he would fall, and he tore his ACL. I know it wasn't intentional, but that's what fandom is, irrational feelings about this kind of stuff. But, it's tough because Klay Thompson, if some of y'all recall, back then, he was really growing his game. You know what I mean? He wasn't just this spot up shooter, this catch and shoot guy coming off screens. He was doing more. And it's almost, it's kind of ironic actually that he was being compared to Paul George at the time. He was getting up to that level. And it's ironic because, right, the Warriors tried to replace Klay with Paul George, but obviously that trade with the Clippers did not work out. But, in another universe, I'll imagine Klay not getting hurt and him willing that Game 6 victory, because he was on one. He was having a Game 6 Klay night. And I thought he would have had a good shot of getting Finals MVP. I would have thought, that, sending the series back to Toronto 3-3 would have shook Toronto, and I think the Warriors could have pulled it off. Yes, that is potentially wishful thinking. It's all, you could debate me on this all you want, but it's something that I've thought ever since that day, and that Klay would have been Finals MVP. He would have had his chance to shine, and that the Warriors would have adapted reasonably well to the post-KD season and moved on from there. But unfortunately, that is not how it all went. And, here we are. Klay's gone. He's going to the Mavericks. He signed for 3 years, $50 million or something like that. So it wasn't about the money, and we knew that. It's been reported that he was pretty sour about how things went with the front office and negotiations. And, that's his right. That's his right. At the end of the day, I think it's the best thing for everyone. I talked about for years that this Warriors core of three dudes, Steph, Klay, Draymond, that maybe they could be like the Spurs. And Klay was the Manu guy who would come off the bench happily. But Klay was always fighting those demons. He was always trying to get back to where he was. And we thought that maybe he'd gotten past them a little bit with the 2022 title, but clearly, he could never get to the heights of his powers. So, and beyond that, he didn't just plateau, he started fading off. And we don't need to get into how bad he was this past season, but I just think the clean break from the Warriors, from his past, and whatever it takes to go play with Luka, go play with Kyrie, go play in another city, go to a team that was just in the finals, and hopefully you're going to give them a better chance to get to the finals. Just a clean break with all that. Don't worry about your legacy or having to see different versions of yourself, comparing them to the past. Don't worry about young upstarts like Brandon Pajemski or Moses Moody coming and taking your spot. Don't worry about feeling disrespected by Steve Kerr or Joe Lacob or Mike Dunleavy Jr. Just move on. It's great. And for the Warriors, it's tough because like missing out on Paul George and then news that Klay was probably going to move on all happened on the same day this past Saturday. But if you just isolate the Klay Thompson thing, it's good for them. It's good for them, right? Because his vibes for the past couple seasons have been terrible, especially this past season, right? Trying to deal with getting benched, Steve Kerr being way too loyal to the veterans and putting him out there when he shouldn't be. And then, fan reactions and stuff. And a lot of that stuff is justified, right? Like, it's cool. There's a pretty long leash with these Warriors to, play and to give these guys a chance to do what they do. But if Klay just is consistently not performing, it's going to get a little rough, right? We don't know what Moses Moody can do, right? People are questioning like, oh, is he good enough? We don't know. That's because Klay's been there. And with him gone, you don't have to worry about this kind of, I won't say dark cloud, but like grayish cloud hanging over Pajemski, Moody, Steve Kerr, all this stuff. Like, oh, like him itching to get it. Like that kind of drama, it's gone, right? Like if the Warriors win, and then Klay isn't on the court, like there's no drama or like what does Klay think and all that other stuff. And then you get off his contract. That's money that's off that. And, I, for one, am always, especially after the last two seasons, I wanted to see something different, right? I have great respect for the core three and what they've brought in terms of championships and in terms of like the last 10, 12 years and stuff. But to me, like I just could not go through that all over again. It was no longer fun. And if you've listened to me before, there's a lot of blame to go around, but of course I put a lot of that on what Draymond has done, punching Poole and then like getting suspended by smacking Nurkic and headlocking Gobert and not taking responsibility for it. You know what I mean? Being so like narcissistic and kind of myopic about it. But to me, I just shake it up. That's what this team needs. And not that Klay was like the biggest reason, but it was part of it, right? I mean, you think about it. The Draymond ruined the 2022-23 season by punching Poole. And then, they decided to pretty much run it back, right? Like they gave Steph what he wanted. They got rid of Wiseman. They brought back GP2. That allowed them to sign Draymond, which he always wanted. And then they moved Poole for Chris Paul, which shored up what we all thought was the biggest Warriors issue going into the season, which was the fact that their second unit non-Steph minutes were terrible, that they would lose leads, that there were too many turnovers, and Chris Paul was supposed to shore that up. And then we started the season 6-2. This is the norm, whatever. The last Steve Kerr last season was the aberration. But you know what? It was the starting five, four of those dudes let everybody down. So that's Draymond getting suspended, Wiggins coming in out of shape and doing his half-assed effort, and Klay trying but just not being able to do it, and then Looney just kind of falling off a cliff. I mean, I've talked before, like, hey, Klay wants it so bad and Wiggins doesn't. I wish that they could switch bodies, you know what I mean? Because healthy 29, 30-year-old Klay would be exactly what this team needs. But instead we have a healthy 29, 30-year-old Andrew Wiggins who kind of wants it, or wants it only when there's trade rumors about him. But, that's besides the point. But, at the end of the day, they let Klay go, and they get back 2 second-round picks or something. So one from Dallas, one from Charlotte, and let's face it, like the Warriors are trying to kind of shed salary, right? Like I was saying, they gave the vets what they wanted last season, but they didn't perform. And so if I'm Lacob, if I'm Mike Dunleavy, they're probably just going like, well, we gave it a shot. And with the new CBA, how punitive it is if you just keep paying people, then we ain't doing this, at least not this way, right? They're not like going way in, because it's silly, right? It's silly. And not that I want this team to blow it all up and restart, but like I can get kind of what they're doing here. Like, you know, beyond the sentimentality of Klay Thompson leaving, you look at like Warriors Twitter and social media and all the hot takes and the talking heads and all this stuff, like Richard Jefferson saying that Klay Thompson should be mad, and or Warriors Twitter saying like, you know, Lacob is dumb and Mike Dunleavy is stupid. But like, you know, I read other places, right? Like you go in comments on The Athletic, or you go in, I mean, even like I put a poll out on YouTube and I asked, like, you know, do you want Klay Thompson to return to the Warriors next season? And this was like a month ago. And 20% said, yes, you can't break up the core three. I don't care the cost. 23% said, no, he needs a fresh start. And Pods and Moody are ready to go. And 57% said maybe, but only if he signs for $20 million or less. So he signed for $20 million or less with the Mavericks. And, you know, that's his right. Like I said, it's better for him. And he had hurt feelings. So that's fine. It is what it is. But like, a lot of people understand that, you know, we're not envisioning, you know, next season a Klay Thompson that is from 2019 or before. We're envisioning a Klay Thompson that is gradually diminishing even further and further in his powers. And how much money would that have been worth? Like, you can give like legacy contracts to like one guy, right? Like back in the day, Jordan getting $30 million for 1 year, which was a ton back then in the late 90s, because he's Jordan. You know, Kobe was getting balloon payments, but the Lakers sucked at that point. And then with the Warriors, it's like, it's Steph, right? You can't afford it, especially with the new CBA, to be given like, you know, like handshake, thank you for everything, legacy contracts to Steph and Draymond and Klay and whatever and all that stuff. And if they're not producing, and I can see Steph maybe getting that. Draymond obviously signed for four years, $100 million. He's still got a few years left on his contract, but at least he's still producing when he's on the court, Draymond. But, you know, with Klay, you just can't do that. And I think a lot of people understand that when you get past the feelings, it makes basketball sense. Yes, technically the Warriors have less shooting, but you have to take into account the financial side of it if you're trying to build moving forward. You can't just handcuff yourself, and you have to give Moody a shot. You have to give Podziemski a shot and rely on the idea that maybe these guys can play good enough defense. Klay's gravity is always something that the Warriors are going to miss. People talk about like someone like Kuminga versus Klay, and yeah, obviously Klay's a better 3-point shooter, but like, and Kuminga can't shoot threes. Kuminga can shoot threes. Obviously he's a small forward, power forward, as opposed to 2-guard small forward, but like they just don't fear it yet, so they don't do it. Klay, they still fear it, but I mean, that's not something you're just like, well, we need the fear, so let's pay him $24 million a year for it. Who knows, right? Like I'm fine with the move. It sucks to see him go, but the version of Klay we were seeing, both like on the court and off the court, I think the Warriors can do without that, right? The pouting, the kind of emo Klay type stuff, and the sense that, you know, he's sucking the air out of the room on the court, if you know what I mean. So, you know, it is what it is. And yeah, right now it looks like the Warriors are a very middling team, but hey, let's see where they can go from here. And it's tough, right? And again, like playing the blame game, like I said, I hate Danny Green. But hey, you know, you think about this. You think about like if Draymond didn't punch Poole, what the ripple effect of that is on last season. I've talked about that a ton on this podcast. But then even on this past season, Draymond missed 27 games. I think 20-ish or so were from suspension. So I won't, you know, if he's injured, whatever, that doesn't count. But like they missed the 6th seed by 3 or 4 games. and he missed 20 games. And I'm not saying that they went 0-20 those games. I didn't look it up. But if they can win 3 or 4 games and get to the 6th seed, I'm not saying they're going to blow through people, but they get a chance, right? They get a chance. We've seen this team drop stinkers like they did against the Kings, but we've seen them come back from that. So, regardless, even if they lose in the first round or second round again, maybe the tone is different. Maybe there's better vibes than like, lost in the play-in, 10th seed. We're a 10th seed and we stink, and Klay went 0 for 10. Like, who knows? It's all hypothetical, but Draymond's actions have consequences, and there's a ripple effect to these things. And this is one of them. Like, the team came not only short of a championship, it came way short. And once they came up way short, you knew changes were going to come. There was a part of me that was like, I'd almost prefer this team not make the play-in, because it's more of just like a boom. It's like a stark reality. Losing or getting blown out by the Kings in the play-in, that was almost the same deal. So, it's tough. Maybe things would have been different, but hey, you have to expect changes if your guys don't perform. If they don't perform. And, I see a lot of, Twitter's hilarious, right? Like, it's just people just ranting and stuff, so you can't take it too seriously. But, people saying that they're worried about the money, they're just trying to save money, and then they're trying to save money so that they could figure out how to put together a better team. And I'm not like, a Lacob apologist, but it's like, get out your feelings, right? let's make this make sense. You know what I mean? And hey, the Draymond stuff, again, some of these guys brought this on themselves. Like, Curry wanted Draymond back. Made basketball sense, but he's not on the court all the time because of his immaturity and his lack of self-awareness, apparently. So you kind of reap what you sow in that respect. You know what I mean? Everybody holds up Steph. I love Steph, but like, no one's perfect. A lot of people, especially Warriors fans, they hold him up as a god, but like, no one's hands are completely clean of this. It's not easy to maintain a dynasty. The Warriors were lucky to have some chances, and they were mishandled, right? Like, I was supportive of the Wiseman pick, and to this day, like, obviously that didn't work out. I think that there were a lot of hiccups along the road, but then you look at like the Kuminga pick, the Moody pick, those guys can play, but they just haven't had the development or the opportunity. And whose fault is that? There's a lot of folks, like myself, that wanted those guys to play more. And then there's a lot of folks who are very like, Steve Kerr apologists who say like, oh, Kuminga didn't earn it, and blah, blah, blah. But like, yeah, maybe let's find a happy medium here. You know what I mean? But, this is where the Warriors are. There's a lot of chatter about, let's get Lauri Markkanen. Let's give everything for Lauri Markkanen. And we'll see. If you're dealing with Danny Ainge, I worry about that, because if the Warriors are coming from a point of desperation and dealing from weakness, then I worry about getting run over in a deal with Danny Ainge. And if you have to give up like Kuminga, Podziemski, Picks, Moody, all this stuff, Wiggins, everything, hey, do something interesting, that's fine. But, we'll see. Markkanen would be the perfect guy next to Draymond in terms of the way he stretches the floor and all that jazz. But, I don't think that'll happen, but we'll see. I could be wrong by the time this comes out. And, in terms of the Warriors doing right by Klay, they did offer him 2 years, $48 million. And if he sees that as disrespect, that's within his right. But it's the same amount of money that Draymond got for fewer years, but it lined up with Steph's years. And he turned it down, so they tabled it. And then he bet on himself. And damn it, Klay, you should, right? That's who he is. But he didn't deliver. And like I said, you can't just give Klay the money just because, for old time's sakes. You know what I mean? If you were tanking, if you were a terrible team, sure, spend some money, like do like a farewell tour and lose and vie for the first pick in whatever draft that ended up being. But like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, his value was diminished, so they didn't deal with him as a priority. They wanted to see what else was out there. Fine. And people have talked about, on The Athletic, Anthony Slater talked about how he kind of saw the writing on the wall a few weeks ago, and that Klay is different. Klay is going to take things personally and not just understand its negotiation. And so he's gone, and so be it. And that is the best thing for the Warriors and the best thing for him. It's not the best thing for hardcore Warriors fans, sentimental Warriors fans, because we love what he's done for the franchise and for the championships and all that stuff. We got those memories, but that's why the clean break is better, right? So we don't have those clouded with more negative memories, bad memories of him pouting, him slowly fading, him self-sabotaging, whatever it is he's trying to get back to. So I wish Klay the best. I wish him, a mental peace, you know what I mean? Because I know, it must have been tough for him. But moving forward, one more thing. And then I heard a clip from Richard Jefferson saying, he should be mad and all this other stuff. Klay should be mad because he feels disrespected. But it's like, come on, man. The Warriors should pay him just because. And he's not even talking about the franchise and what that would mean for the fans and how bad the team could be and how handcuffed they would be. So I take issue with all these people just trying to rant and rave. And I get it. They're players and there's a brotherhood and all that stuff. And he's trying to stay on the good side of players everywhere. But it's just, that's why I don't watch ESPN or all those weird hot take shows. But anyway, that being said, what's next? We'll see what the Warriors do in terms of the rest of free agency. They signed DeAnthony Melton for 1 year. That's helpful defensively. We'll see if he can stay healthy. But then in terms of the two guard spot, Podziemski, Moody, and then just in terms of the youth, you got Kuminga. And, if this is who they roll with, I'm a big supporter of some of these young dudes, but they really, really set them up with targets on their backs. The Warriors have, the franchise has, Steve Kerr has, because I see a lot of people ranting about Kuminga, not being that good or being too far away, but it ain't his fault. You know what I'm saying? It ain't his fault he rode the bench. It ain't Moody's fault that he played well and hard and dependably for the most part in the playoffs and then would get benched all over again. It's not his fault that Steve Kerr preferred Anthony Lamb and Ty Jerome over those two dudes. It's not their fault that they got drafted onto a team that didn't know how to develop young guys. It's not their fault that they were on a team where Draymond punched Jordan Poole and Steve Kerr frantically tried to figure out how to get wins and into the playoffs, and so he wouldn't risk playing young guys. It's not their fault, but because they're replacing certain guys, they will for some parts of the fandom, they will be set up for failure. There will be targets on their backs. There will be cheap shot tweets and all this stuff. But I'm very curious to see how these guys adapt, what they can show, because I guarantee you Moody will step up. He may not turn into Chris Middleton. He may still have slower foot speed, but hey, let's be honest, Klay's foot speed was gone. You know what I mean? It's not that Moody's more athletic than young Klay. He's more athletic than old Klay, at least. And Podziemski has a little bit of flavor to his game too. So, I support these dudes. Maybe the expectations are going to be lowered and whatnot, but maybe there's moves to be made that we haven't seen yet. But I, for one, at least it's different. And somebody can say well, at least they're not going to be contenders. They weren't contenders last year. They weren't contenders last year. And now they're not. Paul George was not going to make them instant contenders. You know what I mean? I'm actually of the faction that did not want Paul George because I didn't want him, this injured 34-year-old player, on a 4-year max deal that lasted longer than Steph, that lasted longer than Draymond. But the offseason is always fascinating and dramatic. The NBA is a year-round season because of this. So I'm excited to see what happens. I'm entertained, honestly. And maybe it's because I took a few months away. I'm entertained by the reactions to this stuff because it's just like so melodramatic and so intense, and the feelings are so raw from fans, from players, from talking heads, that it's like, oh man, this is why live sports are so entertaining. This is why somebody like Jason Tatum can sign a $300 million contract or something, because the eyeballs and the attention and the emotion and the feelings are always there. So, we'll see what happens next. And that's all I got for now. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. And then also on your favorite podcast platform. And that's it.